What Are the Odds by Mike Lindell. From Crack Addict to CEO. Continued. Chapter 21. A New Drug. The Minneapolis show drew hundreds of exhibitors. Most of them operated from expensive booths, many with professional lighting and graphics. I didn't have money for that, so I set up my space with carpet, a table, and an inkjet printed version of my new slogan: the most comfortable pillow you'll ever own. I slipped the printout into a plexiglass sign holder that I bought at Staples. Still hokey, but at least good enough to be in the show. Before the show opened, I spent a lot of time thinking about how to improve the pitch that had managed to sell only 12 pillows at Eden Prairie. I decided on a problem solution presentation. If it were me, I thought, I'd want to see how my pillow was different. I decided to set up my booth as a demo. By the time the doors opened, I had placed three large jars on the table, each with one of the three types of foam in my fill. When people walked up, I explained that I'd always had problems sleeping. The pillows I was using would go flat. I'd use my arm to prop them up, but my arm would fall asleep, and most mornings I'd wake up with a neck ache or a headache. From the nodding and murmuring, I could tell this was a problem that lots of people shared. I would then demonstrate the solution that my pillow could be molded to fit their preferences. Can you put your hand here and push down? I would say, indicating the spot where a person would lay their head. See? The foam stays put. You can put 6 pounds of pressure on it, which is less than your head weighs when it's supported, and it will hold its shape. Wow, was the usual was the usual reaction. Then I would ask them to press a little harder and watch their amazement as the foam released and returned to its three separate components. At that point, I'd thrown out the bonuses. Oh, at that point, I'd throw out the bonuses. I make my pillow right here in Minnesota. Each pillow has a 10-year warranty. Plus, you can wash and dry it. Also, I'll give you a 60-day money back guarantee. If you don't like it, come back and I'll refund your money. People came back all right. On the second day of the show, at least 15 people came back. They'd slept on the pillow the night before and came to buy more. These return customers told all the new customers at the booth how much they loved my product. One guy took his pillow home, took a nap, and came back the same day to buy more. That day, one of the show organizers walked over, said he'd seen more My Pillows walking out of the show than any other product. Before the event was over, Karen and I had sold nearly everything we had, about $10,000 worth of product. But the real thrill for me wasn't the money, it was the change in me. I had invented something that helped people. The feeling I got from knowing that was a revelation. The emotion took me all the way back to Mother's Day 1968. As gifts for our moms, everyone in my second grade class had decorated flower pots and filled them with soil and seeds. That Friday afternoon, we took the flower pots home. I was standing in line for the school bus when a boy ran up to the girl in front of me and deliberately knocked her flower pot out of her hands. As it smashed on the ground, he ran away laughing, and the girl burst into tears. I held out my flower pot. "You can have mine," I said shyly. "But it's for your mom," she protested. "That's okay. I've got lots of presents for my mom." That wasn't true, but helping my classmate that day filled my heart so full that I never forgot it. Now at the Minneapolis show, when I realized that my pillow was helping people, I felt I had found something I'd been searching for most of my incredibly self centered life without even knowing what it was. As a result, I could talk to people about my product without fear and without drugs or alcohol. When I was demonstrating my pillow, the hours flew by, and I couldn't wait for the next day to start. I wasn't conscious of the connection then, but looking back, I realized that I'd found a new drug. While the Minneapolis Home and Garden Show was a big success, it didn't make us rich. Credit card vendors were slow to pay us for purchases made through paper processing, where you run the customer's card through one of those old manual knuckle busters with a carbon copied slip. To stay afloat, I kept up my card counting with Corey, Jim, and Nick. Card counting and managing my pillow kept me not only away from home but out of town, which further fed Karen's insecurities. Even when I was in town, I often stayed away from home so that I could smoke crack. With the kids getting older and more aware, I was too paranoid to use crack at home, worried they'd walk in and catch me. During this season, we usually had cash on hand, but we were still scraping to get by, maneuvering, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Our family business was small but growing, and that gave us hope. The Minneapolis Home and Garden Show led to more shows, but even more importantly, to the Minnesota State Fair. The State Fair drew not tens of thousands of people, but hundreds of thousands. When we were accepted as exhibitors, my kids pitched in, helping haul in the materials and set up the booth. Even Heather, home from college, sold pillows. By the second day, we had customers lined up so deep they were blocking walkways. We hit it out of the park, selling tens of thousands of dollars in product. Suddenly, I realized we could exhibit at the Minnesota State Fair and basically not work for the rest of the year. That wasn't what I wanted to do, but I could if I had to. During the event, an older guy walked up to our booth. He stared at my signs and read them aloud. Guaranteed the most comfortable pillow you'll ever own, he said, scowling. Ha! How can you guarantee that? I'm 82 years old. Do you have any idea how many pillows I've owned? That's a crock of, well, you know. This old guy was probably the crabbiest human being I had ever met. I rubbed the back of my neck and looked longingly at the deep line of customers behind him waiting to see my demo. There was no way I was ever going to please this guy. I was anxious to talk to customers who might actually be interested, not this crank. But instead of moving on, he shuffled over to the couch we had set up at our booth, hitched up his pants legs, and sat down. He picked up a pillow, pushed on it a few times. How the hell is this supposed to be comfortable? He demanded. It's got lumps in it. Now the crowd was watching and listening. Suddenly, making this guy happy became a customer service challenge. Well, sir, the pillow may feel lumpy, but that's part of the design. You can shape it to fit your head. I guarantee it, and I'll give your money back if it doesn't work for you. Ha! He snapped again. Where am I supposed to find you? Over at your factory in China? No, sir. I make these pillows right here in Minnesota. I don't believe it. There ain't no pillow made in the United States. They're all made in China. Well, look at the tag. I pointed to our Made in the USA label. Well, I'll be damned, he said, staring at it. He was quiet for a moment, but I could see he wasn't convinced. Sir, where do you live? I asked. I live in Plymouth, Minnesota. Lived there all my life. Okay. How about I give you a pillow? You give me your phone number and I'll call you in about a week. If you don't like the pillow, I'll drive over and pick it up. If you do like it, you can pay me then. The man raised his eyebrows. "You'd do that?" By now, the waiting crowd was really into it, urging us on. "Yes, do it! Let's get this line moving!" The old man squinted up at me, still skeptical. "You don't want to see my license first or something?" I held up my hand. "Nope. I just want you to write down your phone number and your name." "Well, all right." I searched around and found a napkin and a pen. The man jotted down his name, which was Joel, and his number. When he walked off with a pillow tucked under his arm, the crowd cheered. A couple of weeks later, I dialed Joe's number. "Hi, Joel. This is my—" "Is this that damn pillow guy?" Joel interrupted. "Are you going to come over here or what? You said you'd be over." "Yeah, I could probably come by today. I'm heading in that direction." "Well, bring 3 or 4 more of these damn things with you," he said, and hung up. "Well, bring 3 or 4 more of them damn things with you," he said, and hung up. I smiled. Challenge one. When I pulled up in Joel's driveway later that day, I could see him sitting in a recliner staring out his front window. No book, no magazine, just staring. I banged on the door but heard nothing. I knocked 2 or 3 more times before I heard him yell, "What the hell do you want?" "It's Mike from My Pillow," I called out. "I've got your pillows." "Well, get in here and hurry up. I'm busy." I carried in an armload of pillows and set them down on his living room floor. Joel pulled out his checkbook and asked, "How much do I owe you?" I hesitated. "Well, I'll give you a deal since you're buying a 4-pack." Joel scowled. "I don't need no damn deal. Just tell me what I owe you. And hurry up about it. Can't you see I'm busy? I've got better things to do than deal with you." I told him the price, and then inspiration hit. Ever since the return customers at the Minneapolis Home and Garden Show, I had been asking people for testimonials. "Hey, Joel," I said, "could you maybe write me something you liked about the pillows? I'm just starting out, and I'm trying to collect testimonials to help me advertise." Joel heaved a huge sigh, as if this were the biggest inconvenience in the world. "All right, I'll write you something." I handed him a scrap of paper. He scribbled something down, slapped the paper on top of his check, and shoved both in my hand. "Now get the hell out of here." Back in my truck, I read what Joel had written. "I'm 82 years old, and I don't like a damn thing, but these pillows are okay." Today, we've sold tens of millions of pillows, but Joel's testimonial is still my all-time favorite. Chapter 22. Saving Uncle Butch. December rolled around again, and along with it came my annual Iowa deer hunting trip that I never miss, even to this day. This year, a huge snowstorm was expected. Usually, Skelly, Tom, Mark, Jeff, Doug, and I camped. But this year, because of the stormy weather, we decided to stay in a motel in Fairmont. One night near the end of the hunt, we closed down the Fairmont VFW hall and everyone headed to the hotel. But I was high on cocaine and there was no way I could sleep. Instead of going to the hotel, I decided to go see if my Uncle Butch was still up. This was the uncle who'd hitch a ride with my friend Rick and me and beat me at gin rummy all the way from Minnesota to Kansas. More than 20 years had passed and Uncle Butch's alcoholism had worsened over time. He was still a good-hearted drunk, but he had also become what is known as a maintenance drinker. A maintenance drinker is someone who has consumed so much alcohol for so long that his or her body now requires a certain level of alcohol in order to function. That was Uncle Butch. He started off drinking around the clock because he liked to. Then he drank around the clock because he had to. My uncle's real name was Charles Booth Jr., and he was the son of my grandfather, the Deadwood card dealer, as well as his namesake. The two had a terrible relationship, one that had ended when my grandfather died in 1967. I wasn't sure if that was part of the pain that drove him to drink, but he had become the most serious alcoholic I had ever known, and I'd known plenty. Divorced with a grown son and daughter, Uncle Butch had always been a jack of all trades, drifting between jobs, bunking in with different relatives. Now he was doing odd jobs and living rent free in an apartment over a grocery store called Gunther's Foods, thanks to the kindness of one of the store's owners. When I left the VFW, the snow was falling in fat flakes that swirled in the glow of the streetlights. I climbed the steps to my uncle's apartment and tapped on the door. He was happy to see me, and we sat down in a tiny run-down living room to talk. Looking around, I saw a clutter of empty liquor bottles, and also, in a dark corner, a man I'd never seen before, sipping something brown from a half-empty highball glass. He was about 20 years younger than my uncle and had stringy hair that touched his shoulders. He glanced at me, then returned to nursing his drink. Uncle Butch did not introduce us. I was worried about my uncle. This was a man who hadn't had an alcohol free day in at least 40 years. Where his relatives had once welcomed him, they now more or less tolerated him. He'd gotten to where he would drink himself to sleep in broad daylight in someone's living room or break something valuable and not remember it. When my sister Cindy got married, she and her first husband kept a commemorative bottle of champagne from their wedding day. They held on to that bottle for years until the day Uncle Butch found it, popped the cork, and drank it. Incidents like that strained Butch's relationships, but I knew he didn't have a malicious bone in his body. I sat down with my uncle, people of little, uh, who reminded people a little of George W. Bush. We chatted about this and that for a few minutes. Out of the blue, I started talking to him about his drinking. To this day, I have absolutely no recollection of what I said, but I suspect it went something like this. You know what, Uncle Butch? We all care for you so much. Life can be so good, but you're missing it because you spend all your time with these bottles. I gestured around at the mess. It's such hard work to be an alcoholic, isn't it? I then named one of his recent misadventures, something I knew he'd done in a blackout state. That's not you, Uncle Butch. I know that's not you. You're a good person. I realized it was a speech I could have and should have been giving to myself. As I've said, being an addict was incredibly hard work, too. Through all this, Uncle Butch looked at me sadly, but every now and then I thought I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes, just a spark. I told him that my friends and I would be finished with our hunt the following day. How about if I come over and get you when we're through? I'll drive you up to the cities and get you some help. To my amazement, Uncle Butch agreed. The next day, after we finished another successful hunt, I told my buddies we were going to pick up my uncle. We drove Uncle Butch up to the cities and checked him into the Salvation Army. I visited him there a few months later, And for the first time in my life, I saw my uncle sober. He was doing great, working the front desk with all his natural born charm on display. He was practically running the place. I was thrilled for him and gratified that by just giving a little of my time, I'd been able to help. Looking back, I find it interesting that I could talk the talk so well, but never walk the walk. By 2005, my addictions were accelerating. With no boundaries and no self control, I had become a runaway train. My drug habit was getting more and more expensive. Also, I hadn't stopped gambling, especially sports betting, my first and most dangerous addiction. One football weekend in the fall of 2005, it started out badly on Saturday and got steadily worse. By Tuesday morning, I owed my bookie Ed $20,000. Ed was a short Asian man with deep pockets and a long fuse. He and I had become friends, so whenever I was unable to make good on a bad bet, he let me make payments. He knew I was good for it, and I never let him down. But this time I was into him for 20 grand, not the kind of debt I'd ever take care of with a payment plan. That Tuesday morning, I met with Ed and pleaded with him for more time, promising to pay him everything I owed the following Tuesday. Finally, he agreed. I needed a big win the next weekend to cover my losses. More, it had to be a sure thing. A friend of mine had once told me about someone you could call to find out about fixed games. With the obscene amount of money involved in sports these days, fixed games are not as common as they once were, but they're still around. My friend gave me a phone number and I dialed what was basically a direct line to the East Coast mobster department of rigged sports. In a Jersey accent right out of the movies, the guy on the other end of the phone checked me out. Then, for a fee of $5,000, he told me about a fixed college football game coming up that weekend. The mob was paying the quarterback big money to throw the game. With the inside information, I placed a bet. I placed a $25,000 bet. Money I didn't have. Taking the team with the honest quarterback, who had no idea he'd already won, and a 2 point spread. That meant that if my team won by at least 3 points, I'd make $25,000. Then I could pay off Ed, as well as the $5,000 I had borrowed from a friend to pay the fixer. My debt would be erased, but if I lost, I would be out over $50,000. I couldn't let my mind go there. On game day, I was pheasant hunting with some friends near Aberdeen, South Dakota. It was a bright fall day, and the sky was deep blue over the cornfields. With our guns crooked in our arms, we made our way methodically down the rows of corn. Every so often, a flurry of wings would break the quiet, and a gunshot would bang in the clear autumn air. But I wasn't paying much attention. With every step I took, my mind was thousands of miles away on a football field where my life was being decided. One step, I would panic and think, what if fixed games aren't even real? The next step, I would calm myself. Of course they're real. And I'd feel confident again. When we reached the end of the cornfield, I pulled out my cell phone and dialed a score line service. My team, the one with the honest QB, was up 14-0. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Yes!" They heard me all the way across the field. On my way back through the field, a couple of pheasants took flight right in front of me. I was usually a sharp shot during pheasant season, but I was so distracted I didn't even raise my shotgun. Pokey, the former Schmitty's regular who was also one of my hunting buddies, scowled at me. What are you doing? Sorry, I mumbled. I didn't see them. Back at the other end of the field, I placed another call. It was halftime, and my team was ahead 28-0. With that, I knew my team was going to win. I sucked in a huge breath, feeling like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I shared the news with my friends. Pokey just looked at me. Great, he said. Are you finally going to hunt now? I resumed stalking birds in the cornfield, now paying attention. We made it to the end of the mile-long field, and I dialed the score line again, expecting to hear something like 42-0. Instead, my blood ran cold as I heard the score 28-14. My face must have gotten white because one of my hunting buddies looked at me and said, "Did someone die?" Yes, I thought. It's going to be me. I called the fixer in New York and demanded to know what was going on. "There's a little problem," he said. "That QB we paid off, he broke his arm before halftime. The second string quarterback has the flu. The third stringer is in there and he's throwing touchdowns like crazy." "The third stringer? Are you kidding me?" Ending the call, I told my friends I had to go into town to see the end of the game. They all knew I'd probably bet huge, but the look on my face told them things weren't looking good. My pickup's tires threw up a cloud of dust as I sped toward Aberdeen. On the drive, I checked the score again, 28-21. In town, I drove past a couple of bars, hitting the brakes only when I saw one with a satellite dish on the roof. I pulled up and ran in. Inside, a handful of locals were watching the Nemer- the Nemer- the, the Nebraska game. Out of breath, I said, "Hey guys, I've got $25,000 on a different game, and my life is over if I don't win. Can I buy you all drinks if we switch the channel just until the end of the game?" Due to the panic on my face, they all agreed, or maybe it was the offer of free drinks. The score was still 28-21, with my team up. 11 seconds were left on the clock. The third string QB on the team that was supposed to lose was under center at midfield. He took the snap. He backed up to throw. The defense swarmed the backfield. It looked like they had him. But the QB scrambled and slipped free. A linebacker gave chase, and I willed him to tackle this guy. The linebacker wrapped his arms around the QB's legs, but the guy popped out again, drew back his arm, and threw a long bomb. The ball arced downfield. I stopped breathing. An enemy receiver leapt up, pulled the ball down, sprinted for the touchdown, and was tackled just short of the end zone. The clock ticked down to 0. I won! I won! I shouted and danced around the bar. I just wiped out $25,000 in debt. Another miraculous escape. What are the odds? Then a guy with a free beer in his hand said, "You do realize they stopped the clock in college to move the chains?" I stopped celebrating. Of course I knew that, but I was so delirious I'd forgotten. I peered up at the TV and saw the officials moving the chains. One of them stood next to the ball, faced the end zone, and extended his right arm. "First down." The head referee then faced the camera and said the last words I wanted to hear at that moment: "Reset the game clock to 2 seconds." Suddenly, I felt sick. I watched in disbelief as they punched the ball in for a touchdown. The score was 28-27. My team was now up by one. Okay, don't panic, I thought. You've got a 2-point spread. They'll make the extra point, and this thing will go into overtime. If your team wins by even a field goal, you'll still make the spread. And this will all just have been a nightmarish close call. The teams faced off at the 3-yard line. The long snapper hiked the ball. The holder took the snap and placed it. The kicker booted it for the extra point. No good. The kick went wide. The kick went wide. My team won by a single point. They had not covered the spread. I had lost. Everyone stared at me in stunned silence. I turned and walked out of the bar without saying a word. Outside, the cold South Dakota air hit me in the face. I felt completely helpless. I had no idea what I was going to do. I now owed over $50,000. Back at our hotel, I pretended to my friends that things weren't as bad as they really were. I didn't want to ruin their trip. The next day, Sunday, I called Ed and tried to place bets like it was no big deal. But he immediately started asking where his money was. And that I broke down and told him I didn't have a dime to my name. Mike, it's time you quit betting on the games, Ed said. If you promise me you won't bet on sports anymore, I will help you. I almost did a double take and looked at the phone. As I hung up with Ed, I had never felt so much relief. I had been given grace. What are the odds that I would lose a fixed game? And bookies. Bookies make their money by sending leg breakers when you owe them that much. But somehow, I'd gotten myself in debt to a tiny Asian bookie with a heart of gold. I knew it was some kind of divine intervention, and because of that, the fixed game fiasco was the last sports bet I ever made. After losing that bet, I didn't let Karen know how bad things were. As we headed into the holidays, pillow sales were steady, and we also had regular income from a distribution deal I had made with a man named Wayne Belisle. By the spring of 2005, the whole My Pillow operation consisted of about 10 people. Seeing the potential in my product, Jim Furlong and a friend named Bruce Johnson joined the team, along with some of Charlie's friends in manufacturing. Capital was still scarce, and we were living show to show. I would usually take whatever money I made from a show and head to the blackjack tables in Wisconsin or Laughlin. It was a lot of pressure every week, especially when I had to come up with the money to buy fabric. Then came a chance for stable income. I met Wayne's son, Tom, during a home show. Intrigued by our product, Tom called his dad to tell him how busy we were. I met Wayne soon after he proposed the distribution agreement. I would keep doing my own shows while he would buy a monthly supply of pillows at wholesale. His son would then resell them at a profit. This sounded good to me because it meant Karen and I would receive guaranteed income every month. At least that's the way I understood the agreement. And we received that income until November when Wayne didn't buy products as scheduled. I called him to ask what was going on. Tom has enough pillows on hand, Mike, Wayne said. We don't need any more right now. The problem was that sales didn't go as well for Tom as Wayne or I had expected. I didn't really know why, but I did know I was expecting and relying on Wayne's money, and I told him so. We have a contract, I said. Yes, we do, Wayne said. And he pointed out the wording of our distribution agreement didn't require him to buy pillows monthly. He only had to buy a certain number annually. Technically, he could wait until August of the next year to buy the rest of his year's allotment of pillows. I knew I should have had a lawyer look at the contract, but I didn't have the money for that at the time. I panicked. I needed that income stream, but I had another problem. Wayne brought to my attention that the deadline for applying for a patent on the pillow was coming up in the month of November. Applying for a patent is a complicated and technical process. It also requires hiring a patent lawyer, and those guys don't come cheap. Wayne really believed in my pillow's potential. He found a good patent attorney and loaned me the money to cover the attorney and fees. We got the application in just in time and began the long wait to see if the US Patent and Trademark Office would approve it. I now owed Wayne tens of thousands of dollars. The holidays arrived and my pillow sales continued climbing. That was good, but I still wasn't earning enough to pay Wayne, my mortgage, and my bookie. I was just praying we could grow home show sales. I was just praying we could grow home show sales enough to keep us afloat. That's when Wayne suggested another deal. He would buy my pillow outright. I hated the idea of giving up the company. On the other hand, I was broke and tired of being broke. Wayne told me to give it some serious thought and talk to Karen. It meant I would still be an owner, but he would have the controlling interest, and he wanted to make sure I would be okay with that. He gave me until the end of the month to decide. Reluctantly, in December 2005, I agreed to sell a majority of my pillow.